Greetings and salutations, my friends. Welcome. Today I want to talk about Football Manager 2022. We are, a couple of months away from the release of the new Football Manager, and so the sort of excitement's beginning to sort of buzz, and Miles is probably going to start tweeting out features and stuff that's in the new game. But I wanted to do a very personal video to say 5 things, me personally, what I want to see in the new Football Manager, and I would like for everybody to do the same in the comments below. It's not so much like bug fixes or what you consider bugs, but stuff you personally want to see. You can make it as personal as you like. So this is my list. You can't disagree with it because this is just, my views. Okay, but without further ado, let's get into it. So these are in no order whatsoever of importance, but basically, number 5, as somebody who plays a lot of journeyman saves, a lot of lower league English saves and big databases and stuff, is that I'd like Football Manager to... I'm not sure how doable this is, by the way, but that's not my job. I don't have to worry about it. I just have to point out the problems. And that is how much the game slows down, especially when you're using bigger databases. And it's fair enough if you're downloading databases, like the English Pyramid to level 22 or whatever. They can't account for that. Sports Interactive didn't make the game for that database. But if you just loaded up all the leagues, even a bunch of leagues, and you've got, the star performance thing, and even if it said, yours is 4-star and everything, as you get into the future, as more regens are added, as more history gets put into the database, the game just is slow. My Basingstoke save now takes 10 minutes. And I have a good computer. It takes 10 minutes to get through just hitting continue for a week. And on the player search, the player search. So you go to the player search, and then nobody appears, and then one guy will appear, and then it'll gradually fill out. And I just think whether that would be a rebuild, I don't know remotely know how to fix this problem. But I think it's, for a game that encourages you, for a game that you do have massive long saves, I think that really needs to... It might not be a highlight that you can put on the package. It doesn't slow down as much. But I think on the packaging for this year's game, but I think it's definitely something that I would love to see improved. So number 4 for me is, and I probably crow about this one probably every year, and it is animations. And just not enough. And you could probably always say that. There's always more animations you could add to a game. But I find the biggest problem with animations is when something happens in the 3D match engine that there really isn't a good animation for, and it kind of finds the next best thing. Like, for instance, really easy one to just sort of see is free kicks and penalties. Some of the fouls that your defenders make when you're watching the game and he makes an amazing tackle, clears the ball, and you're like, brilliant, and you're expecting the game to go on, and then it's like penalty. There's just not enough animations and stuff in the game to show you that was a penalty. I'm sure it was a penalty, but from the limited animations and the limited look that we get at it, it just looked like he came across, cleared the ball, kicked it miles, cleared it, lovely. But obviously something's gone in that happened to be the penalty. There's no tussling, there's no shirt pulling, there's no physical connection between opposing players that I just love to see. Even if it was more, just sort of when they jump up in a crowd of players, make it look like they're jumping up in a crowd of players, trying to rise above it and push apart and stuff. There just needs to be way more animations and just improvements to that side of things. Now, the third one for me, it's kind of a bit wishy-washy. It's kind of a bit of a mixture of things because there's a couple of smaller things. One of which is set pieces, especially things like corners, attacking and defending. It's way too simplistic. Imagine I'm your manager, right? You're playing for Liverpool. Congratulations. I'm your manager. You come in first day. We've just signed you. Right, so you come into training, and I'm like, right, mate, okay, today we're going to be practicing some attacking corners. You're a centre-back, so you're like, cool, I might get a goal here. So I'm like, okay, so what I want you to do is go forward. That's the only instructions I'm going to give you as a centre-back. Just go forward. Where forward? Who knows? That's for you to decide. But you know what I mean? There's a couple of instructions, like attack the back post or attack the near post, but there's so much of it missing, and there's so much of it sort of, I would like a player here when we take a corner from the left-hand side. I don't want somebody to come short, but I want somebody 15 yards away from the guy, that if there's any clearances that he'll just get, sort of thing. You should be able to just put a player somewhere that when you're at corners, I want you to stand here, this spot. And there's just no option. And I find sometimes, and that sort of mixes into tactics a little bit. I find with the tactics sometimes it's like you just want a halfway in between thing, and because it sort of jumps across, you can't really move it. But I'll stick with set pieces. All of the set pieces, they're just way too simplistic. They're just sort of, it's set pieces for idiots. It's like go forward, stay back if needed, which I'm still not. Who decides if it's needed that they stay back? Does the player decide? If you're 2-1 up and you say stay back if needed, will they always stay back because your team's winning? Or will they just see more players going up so they've... You know what I mean? It's just that whole set piece area could do with a reboot, a revamp, totally. So the second to last thing I want to talk about is something that I was on my Discord. If you want to join, there's a link in the description. The other night, and we were talking about the idea of what you want to see. And a friend of mine, Meowsley, and a few others, we were talking, and he brought up the idea of us a sort of dynamic world and stuff. Because before, I always like when random things happen in Football Manager, stuff you don't see very much, because we play for so many hours and so many seasons. It's so nice to see this random news event that comes out. And we were talking about it. It's okay, for instance, a player coming out as gay. It's always oh, cool, that's cool. But it's never a real player. And that's for obvious reasons. Because you don't want to do anything that the real life player might want to sue you for, or slander, or whatever it is. Like if you had a random story that a player stumbles out of a pub at 3 a.m. and misses training and he's too hungover to play and stuff like that. That's fine to use for a regen, but you don't want to put that on a current player in case their lawyers decide to sue or the team decides something and everything. But what you could do is what Football Manager needs is a dynamic world. Think bigger. Think rule changes. Last season we had Brexit, and there was that lucky dip as to what sort of Brexit. This season we've got Brexit, but we know what Brexit is, and it's really annoying and stuff. But nothing happens in 10 years' time. If I manage Basingstoke for 20 years, I know for a fact there will be no chance that England enters back into the Europe, or Brentrance. No, that's a terrible tagline. Or a European Super League, or the rules changing, or Rangers and Celtic moving to England, or the Premier League deciding that the Premier League should be 18 clubs, or the World Cup changing, the rules for the international homegrown rules changing, all the sort of stuff that we see all the time in football in different leagues around the world, rules changing constantly, VR changing constantly, everything's changing. In Football Manager, none of that changes unless when the game was released, there was already something happening. The Portuguese third division was going to decide to cut the league by 2 teams. Therefore, in game, in 2 years' time, that'll become 18 teams or whatever. But what we need is more random things to happen in the future. So just randomly. So in 10 years' time, I'm playing in Germany and stuff like this. And the German FA decide that they're going to put a really heavy homegrown influence because there's not enough good international players. So they decide that they're going to make the homegrown rule a lot tighter and you're only allowed to have 3. And stuff like this would be brilliant and really add life and depth to the game. What about clubs outside of our own clubs that get taken over by a rich country, let's say, like a PSG, and you hear all about it and stuff? Or even better, look at Barcelona this season and the crippling crap that 10 years of bad ownership has done to that club, and the fire sale, getting rid of all their players. That never happens in the game. But imagine if you had that in it, like a news article that pops to you that Barcelona were in financial trouble and they were going to have to you would immediately be like, oh my God, go in, scout their players. You'd be like, looking, see if you can get any pickings from the carcass of Barcelona. That sort of stuff. And I think maybe one of the arguments against it is the same as the reason why you don't have players stumbling out of clubs at 3 a.m. is that they would be worried that if a bad thing happened to a league, that league would not like it or something. I no idea if that's true or not, if they would care or not, or maybe just Sports Interactive is being careful. But I almost pitched the idea when we were talking about it on Discord as, well, what about if they made it a DLC? A DLC that came... I don't mind the idea of a DLC for Football Manager. It's one of the best value games in the world. A once-a-year DLC that added lots of random events, but then you could almost like pitch the DLC as like fantasy. So it's like sort of almost saying, this is not real life. This is all weird stuff that could happen. It's realistic stuff that could happen, but it means it's not put on the teams, if you know what I mean, and they could come out halfway through. Because Football Manager is one of those games that you can happily play for 20 seasons and stuff. But when none of the rules change in the entire world, no rule changes, just makes no sense because there's rule changes every other month in football all across the world. Leagues change, leagues appear and disappear and everything. I really wish that could be included in Football Manager. My final thing that I want to see in Football Manager, many of you might already know what this is because it's probably my single biggest bugbear, and I'm sure to many people it's just not an important thing. It just doesn't really register with them. But for me personally, like I said, this is a very personal list. It bugs me. And that is stadiums. How terrible stadiums are in Football Manager. Let's take my Basingstoke team, for example. Start off, we didn't even have a stadium when we start off, but we're 20 years down the road, right? The board come to us, we're like a championship sitting and say, look, we want to build a new stadium. Well, I'm like, cool. So they say 10,000 seater stadium. I'm like, excellent, that's far too small, but hey, we'll take it. We build our stadium. I play a game in it. Brand new stadium, no corners, which of the stadium looks horrible, but maybe that's because we're future-proofing the design. So when we expand, we add the corners. So as soon as it was done, I asked to expand it because we had the fan base, and they expanded it by 2,000 seats. But they just rebuilt one of the stands that they just finished like 2 months before, despite there being corners, empty, sitting there. And then I expanded again by 1,500, and they just expanded another side of the stadium. Add fucking corners, like football stadiums have. Add corners. I don't know how it's so difficult. And not only corners, but add more shit into the game. I'm fed up with seeing a picnic bench and the same fucking football. I'm fed up with seeing backgrounds of stadiums in 360p quality with trees that, if you scaled them to the size of the stadium, would be the world's biggest redwood outside the stadium. These trees are massive. The scale makes no sense. The quality of those background pictures is awful. Like, being my most polite, all that crap is an afterthought. That's like the politest I can be about it. In reality, it's fucking lazy because it's not a big job. I feel like I'm not a game designer, but adding background images that are a bit higher quality or a bit more realistic, and not have every small stadium next to a multi-story car park, or have something in there that when you add all these towns into the games, that if it's like a city, a built-up city, it's more grey and there's car parks and stuff. But if you're a team in the middle of nowhere, it might be a bit more green around it. Just better quality. The stadiums need to look more realistic and stuff. It's such a big part of the game for me going forward when you're building a club, to see your hard work pay off, not only on the pitch in form of players, but on the pitch in form of the stadium and how good it is. And my stadium looks like a shithole that was built in the 1970s on a budget. But it was built in 2035 and improved upon twice and still looks like that. It's just shit. Fix it. It can't be that hard. Right, there we go. I had to do that. It's just the biggest bug. I watch in 3D, the players and everything. I feel like it's just as important. The stadium around the edge, what's going on. The little corners where they seem to have like a toilet or something, but it's a dead end, and or a car parking spot, but there's no way a car could, like, it's just there. It's just bad. It's just lazy. And I will hail Football Manager when they deserve to be hailed about what amazing game they've created, and anything they put in that's really good, I will credit them for it. But stuff like this, that's been the same for donkey's years, maybe it's just me that it annoys, and that's why it's just not an important thing for them. But I feel like you could get one intern to whack up some background images that make that, even if they were the same background images, just not in 360p, like with more pixels, that would be fine. Right, but there you go. They are my 5 things I would like to see for Football Manager FM22, as it's called. If I was to say what I think would actually appear in the next game, set piece designer, I'm hopeful, because I feel like that has been a while. Database slowdown, they might say it's a bit quicker this year, but it's never really a feature, is it? It's just constant trying improvements and stuff. I'm not optimistic on stadiums because I've been talking about it forever and nothing gets changed. They'll talk about more animations and stuff, but whether that improves what looks like penalties and free kicks, I don't know. And the dynamic living world of football, I don't think they will do. But I would happily, let me know what you guys think of this, 6 months down the line, halfway through the game, if they came out with a dynamic world DLC, or even if they just called it like a fantasy world DLC that was £8, a tenner, and what it did was just added random elements to the entire game, whether that's takeovers, collapses, league changes, rules changes, nationalities changes, countries appearing, disappearing and stuff. And if they're worried about the fact that teams won't like this, or the FA or UEFA won't like this, they could market it as like fantasy DLC where random shit happens, but really it's just like normal shit happens. But, they're worried to put it in the normal game. I would happily pay for that. But let me know your 5 things in the comments below. If you're excited for FM22, please do leave a like. Please do follow the channel. I've got lots of plans for FM, as well as Let's Plays and stuff, and a special stream that I'm very excited about, and the Journeyman's coming back. I'm also going to be doing some more sort of talky Football Manager related videos as well. Lots of plans, lots of schedule changes, lots of going on at the moment. So I hope you'll bear with me. Thank you very much for watching. Would you like to see a dog? Freya! No, she's asleep on the couch. Right, thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.